Imagine that you are walking through a forest. Imagine that you can see the intertwining of the branches of the trees over your head and the shafts of sunlight striking the forest floor. Imagine that you can smell the fragrance of the woods, the green leaves and the needles, the minerally scent of the soil under your feet, the earthy smell of decaying leaves. Imagine that you feel the wind brush your skin and move the branches above you. Imagine that you can hear that wind rushing high in the tops of the trees and the forest around you alive with the voices of forest creatures, the voices of birds and the buzzing of insects. Can you imagine, too, that the trees are talking to each other? What if I told you that they are indeed talking to each other? And that it's not imagination, but science. Trees do talk to each other. But it's not happening above ground where we can see it, but below ground where we can't. Underground, there's a whole other world, a world of infinite biological pathways that connect trees and allow them to communicate and allow the forest to behave as if it is one single organism. Suzanne Simard is a professor of forest ecology and conservation at the University of British Columbia in Vancouver, and she's focused her research on this underground world that allows trees to communicate. In her research, she discovered that the trees in the forest she was studying sent each other carbon. And it wasn't just trees of the same species that had this relationship. She was studying paper birch and Douglas fir and discovered that these two species were in a lively two-way conversation. And the direction of the conversation depended on the time of year. In the summer, the birch was sending more carbon to the fir than the fir was sending back to the birch, especially when the fir was in the shade, wasn't getting enough sunlight for photosynthesis. So it would ask the fir for more carbon. And then in later experiments, they found the opposite, that the fir was sending more carbon to the birch because the fir was still growing. It's an evergreen, can do photosynthesis year-round, but the birch was leafless, so it didn't have any leaves. So it turns out that these two species that we think of as being in competition are actually interdependent. Most people think of separate species in the forest as competitors, but Dr. Simard's work was showing us that they are actually cooperators. So I find this information fascinating and exciting, although I'm kind of not really surprised by it because I'm just delighted to know that something I've always suspected, that everything is connected, is actually being known by science, that the species on our planet are interdependent and need each other to survive, and that they communicate with each other in ways that we are just beginning to understand. Another thing that I'm delighted by is that after far too many years of viewing God's creation as something either to be afraid of or something to be subdued, Christian communities around the world are recognizing that creation should instead be celebrated and cared for. Today is the first day of the season of creation. It's a relatively new liturgical season that's being celebrated by Christians all over the world. In case you're not a church nerd like I am, a liturgical season is a period of time designated by the church to mark and celebrate the important moments in the life of Jesus. So the liturgical year begins with the season of Advent and the 4 weeks that lead up to Christmas and the birth of Jesus, and then continues through the Christmas season to Epiphany. It moves into Lent, preparation for Holy Week and Easter, and then moves through Eastertide to the birthday of the church on Pentecost. And as people who follow Jesus as God's expression of divine love, it makes a lot of sense for the observations of the ceremonial life of the church to be focused on the life of Jesus. But many Christians started to wonder why there was no special time set aside for us to remember and celebrate that God is the creator of the earth, the planet that is the source and sustenance of our lives. It was the Orthodox Church that began the practice of setting aside time to focus on God's creation. 30 years ago, in 1989, the Orthodox Patriarch Demetrios I, who was known as the Green Bishop because of his love of the earth, he set aside September 1st as a day of prayer for creation. And the idea caught on and spread through European Protestant churches in the 90s and then spread to both Protestant and Catholic churches around the world. And along the way, that single day of prayer for creation expanded into an entire season, beginning on September 1 and ending on October 4, which is the feast day of St. Francis of Assisi, who's often associated with the celebration of nature, and is for Catholics the patron saint of those who promote ecology. In 2018, church leaders from traditions all around the world, including Orthodox, Catholic, Anglican, and other Protestant traditions, signed a letter to all Christians urging them to join with Christians worldwide to celebrate a season of creation, to join together to rejoice in the good gift of creation and reflect on how we care for it. Now, because caring for the earth and understanding ourselves as part of the web of life that is our planet is so much a part of who we are and how we express our identity as Christians in our community, Pastor Jeff and I thought it was high time that we celebrate the season of creation here at Niles Discovery Church. So each Sunday throughout September, we'll be exploring a different aspect of creation. We'll be exploring how that aspect is reflected in our sacred texts, ways that we can engage more deeply in exploring our spirituality through God's creation, and ways that we can be more intentional in our stewardship for the earth and its resources. And so today we begin with the essential elements of land and water. It was a little hard to choose scripture for today, not because there aren't many passages about land and water imagery, but because there are so many. In fact, the Bible begins with the image of God's Spirit moving over the waters of the deep and separating the land from the water. Humanity is created from the mud of the earth. And the Bible ends with similar imagery. At the very end of the book of Revelation, there is the image of the river of the water of life flowing through the center of the city of God. And on either side of the river is the tree of life, bearing fruit in each month. And the leaves of the tree are for the healing of the nations. And in between those two chapters are story after story and image after image of people connected to the land, or encountering new land, or missing the homeland they've left, or farming the land, the agony of drought or destruction, or the joy of an abundant harvest. And over again, Jesus uses images of the land and nature to communicate his lessons on the kingdom of God. And so too with water. Moses parts the Red Sea, and he strikes a rock to produce water, and Naaman is healed in the waters of the river Jordan, and Jesus is baptized there. And something special always happens when the women go to draw water at the well. In the Gospel of John, Jesus uses living water to symbolize the life of the Spirit, a life deeply connected with and present to God. In the Bible, land and water are both concrete and symbolic, and they are intimately intertwined. And they are intimately intertwined in our bodies as well. Consider that the Earth's crust contains most of the 118 chemical elements discovered so far. It's a lot more than when I studied the periodic table of the elements. Just 8 of those 118 elements make up more than 98% of the Earth's crust. And these are, in order of abundance, oxygen, silicon, aluminum, iron, calcium, magnesium, sodium, and potassium. Our bodies are composed of about 6% minerals: calcium, phosphorus, potassium, sulfur, sodium, chlorine, magnesium, and iron. Do you hear the similarity? Our bodies contain the same elements that make up the soil of the land. Our cells rely on the minerals we receive from the soil in our food, that we receive from the soil that our food is grown in, and we are made up of mostly water, 62%, give or take. It amazes me that our spiritual ancestors believed that we were made up of the dust of the earth, because come to find out, we are. But it's easy to forget this, isn't it? We live in such a highly constructed world that days can go by without us actually walking on the earth. Think about it. When was the last time you walked not on the floor, not on the sidewalk, not on the asphalt, but on the earth? And when was the last time you did it barefoot? When was the last time you really connected with the soil and the water of which our bodies are made? When was the last time you considered your interdependence with the earth? One of the books I read last year on my sabbatical was a collection of essays by Robin Wall Kimmerer called Braiding Sweetgrass: Indigenous Wisdom, Scientific Knowledge, and the Teachings of Plants. Kimmerer is a botanist, a professor of environmental biology at the State University of New York, and an enrolled member of the Citizen Potawatomi Nation. In one of the essays, she talks about learning to make a traditional Potawatomi basket out of black ash. Just think of the tree and all its hard work before you start, says her teacher, the master basket maker. It gave its life for this basket, so you know your responsibility. Make something beautiful in return. Now, the baskets that Kimmerer has in her house now remind her of the lives of the trees from which they're made. What would it be like, she wonders, to live with that heightened sensitivity to the lives given for ours? To consider the tree in the Kleenex, the algae in the toothpaste. Did you know there was algae in your toothpaste? The oaks in the floor, or bamboo in our case here. The grapes in the wine. To follow back the thread of life in everything and pay it respect. Once you start, Kimmerer says, it's hard to stop, and you begin to feel yourself awash in gifts. She continues, in that awareness, looking over the objects on my desk, the basket, the candle, the paper, I delight in following their origins back to the ground. I twirl a pencil, a magic wand lathed from incense cedar between my fingers, the willow bark in the aspirin. Even the metal of my lamp asks me to consider its roots in the strata of the earth. But I notice that my eyes and my thoughts pass quickly over the plastic on my desk. I hardly give my computer a second glance. I can muster no reflective moment for plastic. It is so far removed from the natural world. I wonder if that's a place where the disconnection began, the loss of respect, when we could no longer easily see the life within the object. But every once in a while, with a basket in hand, or a peach, or a pencil, there is that moment when the mind and spirit open to all the connections, to all the lives, and our responsibility to use them well. Friends, in this season of creation, let us too consider the tree in the Kleenex, and the pencil, and the basket. Let us take off our shoes and stand on the holy ground of God's creation, remembering that we are interconnected and interdependent with all God's creatures. And perhaps when we do that, we'll even hear the trees talk to each other.